Welcome to the Strength Lab podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Ramsey, and my guest today is Harry Fleetwood. How's it going, Harry?
I'm all good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Harry is a powerlifting coach for MST Systems. He's an educational consultant, kind of focusing on optimizing strength, performance, and longevity. And you kind of just released a new ebook on peptides, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, releasing next week. It's ready
Okay.
to go. Just doing like the final bits, but no, yeah, coming next week, hopefully. For, get the last few bits. But yeah, really excited to get it out. But yeah, so yeah, it'll be good to go over it because yeah, there's a lot of interesting bits in there.
Yeah. So before we get into the peptides and all that stuff, kind of talk about your journey, like where you started and kind of where you are now, just so people know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I've been lifting for 11, 12 years now, competing. Started in strongman 10 years ago, competing, and kind of switched to powerlifting. Um, And then, yeah, kind of one thing that I've kind of always been interested in, like along the way, is the more supplement side, peptide side. Not so much the PED side, more like the peptides, nootropic side of things, more the neural aspect that kind of goes with lifting. So that stems back to like when the movie like Limitless came out and the whole brain thing with that came out, and then
Hmm.
2015, 2016 when peptides started to become more mainstream, and then like 2017, 2018 the nootropics started to kind of come into like what strength and athletic performance they could do for that. So I've kind of always kind of been interested in that area, and then the last four or 5 years is when I kind of got more into the education side, and that came a lot with more the that's when the kind of the PED side started coming out, the hormone side, and seeing especially in like the strength world, like powerlifting, strongman, strongwoman, there was a real like to me a gap for kind of bridging everything together really. It's like the neural side, the enhancement side, the strength side, like
Yeah.
what we were kind of doing was like looking at what bodybuilders were essentially doing, what they were taking, and just being like, oh, I'll just take what they're taking. It kind of bled down. It wasn't really like it'd get you stronger, but not in an optimal way. And the doses that were being used weren't kind of focusing on so much health. Because like 5 years ago, there's kind of a bit of a turn with the focus on PD enhancement, where it came more health and longevity side,
Yeah.
looking more like the doses were coming lower and we're looking more health. And then now we're kind of seeing that turn with peptides now, where more peptides are coming. It's more mitochondrial health, more mitochondrial efficiency, cellular health, and that kind of like anti-aging side, longevity side. So it's kind of another shift, which is really cool to see. So yeah, I do powerlifting coaching and then the education side and the consultation side of it, everything else on top. Have a real interest in like the female hormone physiology side as well, because again, I find that's a really an area that's just really uh, not like not really kind of talked about as much. Like we look at like what kind of men are doing, but then that
Yeah.
doesn't translate to what females are doing with their physiology, their hormones, all the kind of complexities that are going with that. So that's another area that I really wanted to kind of cover as well, which is a lot of fun as well. That really just started with my fiance. She got into some issues with like hormones and stuff like that, and I just really wanted to do right by her, and we
Yeah.
couldn't really find anyone to kind of help her in any meaningful way. So I kind of like went away like what is all this? What does all this mean? Like 3 or 4 years ago now, and it kind of just like snowballed from there, and being like wow, this is like no one's really talking about this stuff like for powerlifters and female like strong women as well. So um, yeah, that's where I'm at to today. And then yeah, the peptide stuff with just how much at the forefront they are at the moment, like so like just seems to be getting bigger, bigger and bigger. Like what we're realizing that they can do as well just has a lot of potential with. Like you think like well, we'll get into it, but like your BPCs, TBD, everything knows what they do for the healing side, but
For sure.
and what can we do like the performance side and the longevity side as well with them. So that's what the ebook yeah really goes into, kind of deep dives into everything.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the peptides, but I kind of want to do a little bit of uh, like a safety check kind of thing. So peptides are kind of a new thing. Everything that we're going to discuss today is going to be kind of hypothetical in nature. Um, just for the viewer, they're still technically classed as research chemicals, apart from the FDA approved ones like Ozempic and stuff like that. And we'll also kind of go touch on some of those things. So kind of like a general overview, what exactly are peptides, and then how do they differ from like a protein kind of thing?
Yeah, so peptides are like a short chain of amino acids. Uh, Proteins like a longer chain. So peptides are more like a signaling like kind of like supplement. So they'll interact with various processes to signal, downregulate, upregulate certain things. Proteins, a simple one to kind of use an example is a pepsin, which is produced in the stomach, which is an enzyme like 300 and something amino acids long, and that's an enzyme that breaks down protein in the stomach into their individual like amino acids themselves, and your body absorbs them. So yeah, proteins like more like of an enzyme. They do something, they'll bind, attach to something, break it down, process it in some way. Whereas peptides are more like, yeah, like BPC signaling recovery aspect.
Okay.
Um, they're both very similar. They are just chains of amino acids, so like a sequence of amino acids built up. As you get longer, like yeah, like more 100 plus aminos are a protein. Below that are a peptide or a polypeptide.
Are there any peptides that the body produces naturally, or are they kind of you have to take them from, injectables, orals, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's like ton of peptides produced naturally. So easiest one to think about is insulin. And insulin itself is a peptide, and it was the first peptide that was kind of isolated for exogenous use back in the 20s. They used animal pancreases to kind of isolate the insulin from there. And then in the 80s, that was when the first kind of synthetic recombinant insulin was produced. So, like I said, with the peptides, it's signaling used for signaling. So insulin binds to the insulin receptor, which stimulates glucose uptake into the cell. So it's kind of signaling that action into the cell, and then all the processes that come along with that as well of bringing glucose into the cell for energy production.
And that's kind of where they got BPC because that comes from your gut, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So it's derived from human gastric juices. Yeah, and like TB 500 is derived is a synthetic form of thymosin beta 4, which is a naturally produced peptide in the immune system as well. So yeah, a lot of the peptides are derived. So it's like a lot of the some growth hormones like AOD and FRAG are like kind of sections of growth hormones. So growth hormones like 191 amino acids long. So you can kind of take chunks of that to do certain things like growth hormone as well. Like growth hormone kind of what everything it does. If you want to just do like the fat kind of fat the lipolysis side of like fat mobilization, you can kind of take that chain just to do that, but nothing else that kind of comes with it at the same time.
So how does insulin and growth hormone, how do they influence like metabolic processes and like working out and stuff?
So yeah, so growth hormone is if we're using it in a kind of performance context for so if taking exogenous growth hormone, well, both endogenous, so when it's kind of naturally produced, it's got two parts to it. So growth hormone is a think of it as like priming the body for recovery. So kind of it sensitizes cells to uptake nutrients. It mobilizes substrates like fatty acids and glucose for to start to get pulled into the cells. When it interacts with the liver, the liver produces IGF-1, which is then the recovery side of it, which then pulls that substrate into the cells for recovery. That's what kind of stimulates muscle growth, CNS recovery, all that good stuff. So it's kind of two sides to it. So growth hormone on its own isn't anabolic in itself. It's the IGF-1 downstream effects that we're looking for when we're taking growth hormone exogenously. We're pushing we're aiming to push our IGF-1 levels up to kind of super physiological levels itself. It's not so much the growth hormone side, which is doing it's got its benefits. Like I say, it's like kind of priming the system.
Yeah.
It'll like kind of collagen turnover as well for like joint health and joint recovery. Um, it'll improve sleep, things like that. Insulin is if we're looking at it from just a natural perspective, like I said, it will kind of stimulate that glucose uptake into cells. So like post-workout timing, with like your post-workout carbs, you're going to be replenishing glycogen stores in the muscle.
Yep.
Or pre-workout carbs, it's your pushing, you're kind of priming the body to, if you think when you're going through a workout, you're burning through like your glycogen, you want to kind of preserve muscle glycogen. So if you kind of be pre-workout carbs essentially, you're driving insulin up in a pre-workout environment, then when you start working out, it's got the blood blood glucose there available to pull into the cells, like to kind of for more like a rapid turnover of energy production. Um, so yeah, two very like kind of different things, but like when you kind of time them in a certain context, you kind of get the result, like you kind of get the thing you wanting from them essentially.
Yeah. So like if since the body produces those, if you take them from an outside source, you said like growth hormone kind of goes through the liver. Can that damage your liver, or is there other things you can do to protect that, or is there not really any damage that really comes from that?
No, there's no damage, just the receptors. So every cell in the body will have like growth hormone receptors on. So it's when it interacts with growth hormone receptors on the liver that then stimulates the IGF-1 production for that. So it's like a natural process. Um, the side effects that come with like everything, like nothing comes for free. So like I said, with
Yeah.
how it um, with growth hormone where it kind of liberates fatty acids and glucose too high of a dose, and you're keeping that fatty acid and glucose blood sugar too high for too long. That's when insulin resistance becomes an issue. So like pushing things for too hard for too long, a lot of the side effects. But well, with growth hormone as well, things like water retention may be a problem with how it interacts with kidneys and the sodium potassium uptake kind of gets thrown off a little bit, so you maybe store a little bit more water. Um, Insulin, if you time that badly with carb intake, then low blood sugar and then hypoglycemia side effects as well. So just
Yeah.
things to like watch out for. But yeah, like to answer your question, like with liver, it's not like liver toxic in the same
Okay.
sense as steroid is. No.
Yeah. Are there certain carbs that spike your insulin more than others?
Yeah, so you've got like your kind of slow digesting, fast digesting carbs. So um, how quickly they're absorbed. So like dextrose, for example, is like a really simple sugar molecule where if you drink that pre-workout, get a really fast spike in insulin as a response to that. But then equally you get kind of a sharp drop in blood glucose as well. So if we're looking at pre-workout carbs, you kind of want a mix of like kind of medium to slow digest, fast digestion. It's like maltodextrin is a good one for that, where it's kind of a mix of that. So you get that initial spike, that easy absorption, but then the medium absorbed ones kind of come in alongside that to kind of smooth out that curve. Because like if you look at like where like brain and glucose uptake in the brain as well, your brain doesn't really like that kind of sharp spike and drop in sugar levels. It prefers more kind of constant levels. So that's where a lot of problems come from when you're eating like a lot of processed foods, a lot of high processed sugar diets. Is that constant quick spike up, quick spike down is what throws off kind of cognitive function. You get a lot of brain fog, a lot of depressive symptoms. So if we're thinking as well where we're taking these pre-workout and we want to keep that neural focus and that neural kind of sharpness and that edge, you kind of want to kind of blend those two together to keep that kind of a steady stream. So I think like we'll get into it first before we go on, because this is one thing I discuss in the ebook as well, is the how um how little kind of the neural side is thought about in terms of strength and performance. Where if you think like your body, your brain uses like 25% of your like glucose per day. Like it uses a big chunk of it compared to the rest of your like for
Yeah.
what size it is compared to the rest of your body. Like that's a massive amount for the demands of like a substrate to use. So it's when we're talking about insulin resistance in the body, there's insulin resistance, there's potentially insulin resistance in the brain as well, if how your body's uptaking this and your brain's utilizing these carbs and like, oxygen and things like that as well. So one thing what I kind of be thinking about when we're talking about um like kind of carb intake as well is that side of it.
Perfect. Uh, I know a lot of people that may listen to this kind of know about BPC 157 and TB 500. I know like my coach, Coach Ali, he takes that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people in strongman, big strongman, open guys. They take all that stuff. They can be prescribed by a doctor and that kind of thing. Uh, what kind of things do those help with, like injury wise, and like kind of like the the difference between if you don't take them in your recovery process and if you do take them, like what's the different like time?
So yeah, a lot of this is just going to be like purely anecdotal. That's all we've got in terms of strength athletes.
Yeah,
Like you said at the start, like a lot of this stuff isn't FDA approved. So yeah, we've got kind of research and animal models for what these things may do. That doesn't always translate over to like humans. So a lot, and especially when it's like athletes as well, that I think a lot of things that don't get considered like when we're looking at studies like this, this goes for everything really, is that a lot of them are on like kind of gen pop people for a lot of things, some athletes, but when we're looking at kind of like elite level athletes, that's like a whole different world, like the metabolic demands that like, their bodies require, the already heightened like adaptive state they're already in for like what they push their body through is like completely different to normal physiology. So yeah, we're looking at peptides for yeah, like typically like yeah, used for recovery like muscle tears, tendonitis, things like that. I see BPC and TB as two very different things, but very synergistic in how they can work together. So BPC for me, I always kind of explain it as it's like a beacon for recovery. So when you inject it, so say you've got a tear in a your bicep or something, a muscle belly tear, like something like that. When you're injecting it locally into where that BPC locally into where that tear is, the act of injecting it, like breaking the skin into the muscle itself, is going to start a signal because your body's gonna be like, oh, something's been injected here. It's a
yeah,
foreign object. Let's send stuff there to investigate it. So BPC is going to kind of be like that beacon to like direct things. So it modulates inflammation in a positive way where like, inflammation isn't bad, but too much inflammation is bad. So if you've torn a muscle, there'll be a ton of inflammation being flooded there. It's not, it may not be the most productive environment to be recovering in. So like recovery may be slow depending what other factors are playing into it. So it'll kind of reduce too much bad inflammation, promote good inflammation. So it creates like a better environment for recovery and kind of directs a lot of the healing factors to start recovery of the area. When you bring TB in, that's going to be more your, it's going to be upregulating the like material to rebuild that muscle. So a lot of the so it's going to be kind of bringing in the be like that kind of raw material player to start proliferating, differentiating cells to start rebuilding that tissue as well. So you kind of start to see a picture of how BPC kind of sets the landscape, and then TB
yeah,
is going to do the repair. Like TB on its own does a lot, BPC on its own does a lot. When you kind of combine them together, they work even better. And then if you kind of brought GHK, CU, copper peptide into it, that's going to be just upregulating stem cell release from the bone marrow. So more stem cells means they'll get differentiated into muscle cells to then really ramp up recovery. So I did a peptide protocol of BPC, TB 500 and GHK on someone I coached a tour. Well, it was a double hamstring tear 6 weeks before a competition along the bicep femoris and the supra. Can't remember which one. One of those two anyway. And she was really adamant, like, I want to do this comp in 6 weeks. I'd be like, well, it's going to be very touch and go, but we'll see what we can do. So it was
yeah.
a really aggressive peptide protocol. But within 3 weeks, she was kind of hinging again, being able to do a full deadlift off the floor. And then we got her to competition and she had a really good day. Like she set total PB, powerlifting total PB, went
Heck
three
yeah.
for all three lifts on deadlift. Squats were a bit touch and go still, but more from a mental standpoint that she thought I might damage something again. But overall, she had the best performance like that she's done so far. And that was coupled with a couple of other things. Like there was some red light therapy on there as well. A little bit of exogenous insulin use as well, just to kind of drive more like nutrients to the area. So when we're thinking of muscle repair, we've got to create like a really bringing peptides in is going to work, but again, it's the environment you're bringing these into. So if we're thinking muscle repair, that's a really anabolic process to repair muscle, like build muscle.
Yeah,
So you need to kind of create an anabolic environment to speed that up essentially. So even without insulin, they would have worked, but we had 6 weeks to kind of get us to competition. So like, well, what can we use to really drive this up? So there's a little bit of growth hormone again, growth hormone being the anabolic processes behind that, low dose of insulin for the anabolic processes behind that. And then we brought the peptides in just so everything worked out that little bit better.
So if you wouldn't have done those things, would she have not been able to compete at all, probably?
Yeah, I hands down think she wouldn't have made it to that platform. And the physio we were working with, when she saw him at the 3 week mark, I believe, he was blown away by how fast she was recovering. Like he thinks where she was at 3 weeks would have taken a normal person like double that time essentially. Like very anecdotal from what he from his experience of healing similar injury,
Yeah.
helping similar injuries. But yeah, he thinks like what she did like half the time of what she was doing essentially. So like I said, in the right context and the right environment, they can really speed things up like exponentially.
Yeah, I think when Ali, because he was over in Iceland when he tore his bicep, and then he had surgery to repair it, and then he was doing TB and BPC, and I think after like 6, 8 weeks, he was kind of starting to do curls again. He was doing sandbags again, and he was like, if I wouldn't have been doing this, he's like, I would have been out 12, 16, 20 weeks probably. So it's crazy how awesome those work together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think like you have the place, and I mean just going off a little bit as well because I get a lot of messages like off like natural athletes like talking about these, and I don't consider like these things like natural. If you're a natural athlete and you're tested in in your competition, it's like it's a very grey area because the what you're doing is like you're modulating these recovery like cascades and pathways in an unnatural way. Like when you're healing a double hamstring tear in that 6 weeks, like it's impossible to do naturally.
Yeah.
I know like WADA as well. They've put like BPC in as a test now. So if you are kind of like tested, if you are competing in a WADA tested competition, like it's something to keep in mind. But yeah, it's kind of at that point where like we were 7, 8 years ago where SARMs were considered like natural. So like natural athletes were taking SARMs in tested competitions. I think we're kind of at that point where a lot of tested athletes are looking to these for recovery when I don't class them as natural, but people just kind of think, well, they're not hormonal, not androgenic, so yeah, they must be natural. But so I think I for like for like people listening and watching, um, you are kind of as great as they sound. You're like, yeah, like I said, you are doing things that are unnatural to be able to heal these kind of injuries.
So how does that show up on a drug test? I mean, was that like through the blood or is that through urine?
Yeah, like your urine test. So it's just all what it does is really just test for like the metabolites. So whatever BPC gets, what is urinated out, whatever metabolites come out the other end after injecting it, that's what they're looking out for. Certain ratios or certain amounts of it in the urine. Yeah.
Okay.
Like I don't know the exact science behind it, but like I don't know. Like it could easily be like they must be able to test it or they wouldn't have put it, but it could be maybe just putting it there to kind of put people off using it as well. I don't know. But it's one of those with WADA. It's like, well, we can't use this, so we'll just go find something else to use anyway. There are people out
Yeah.
there who can like work around it.
Yeah. So how has peptides really gained its popularity? Has it been like super, super recent?
I think just like over the years, yeah, it's kind of just been picking up like what they can do. So like I said at the start, like for me, I started hearing them about like BPC and TB back in like 2015, I believe. But back then it was just like through forums and through like kind of more like higher level athletes really, especially like when I was back in strongman back then. A lot of the top level strongman at that time were kind of started to talk about it with what they can do, but we didn't really know the extent of what they could do back then. So it's like over like the last year, 10 years or so, um, they've kind of really been picking up with um, what they can do. And when you kind of look at the kind of functional health side as well of what they can do, unless like unlike general kind of pharmaceuticals and prescription medications, which are prescribed to fix an issue that has already become apparent. So like if you look at like Western medicine as a whole, someone who has high blood pressure does get given blood pressure medication instead of looking at like what's caused that high blood pressure, where peptides are like your body understands them, like they kind of like they change the amino acids, but they like to put it simply, like they speak the body's language essentially, not trying to like fit a like a cube into like a circle or something like that. They kind of like work elegantly, is what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say. So yeah, people are kind of seeing the kind of functional health side to them, like kind of preventative health benefits of them, the fat loss benefits of them, the anti-aging, performance recovery side. Like there's a lot we can kind of like put together to build these stacks that are generally really well tolerated. Like I said, like nothing like certain people won't respond favorably to a lot of things. Like everyone's different, but for a lot of people, like we can use these really powerful tools to kind of push forward, which I think like peptides are going to be the that next step up, especially in kind of perform from a performance benefit. I
for
think
sure.
like I don't think PEDs in terms of like your androgens, there's nothing new going to come out of that really. We've kind of I don't want to say we've kind of nailed it, but we're still in the dark age in terms of the health side of it. But in terms like you can't keep pushing them up and up because yeah, you will. That's where we've tried it, and then that's when, like I said, we've kind of dialed down the doses now, thinking more about the health side and the health risks of it. So it's like, what other pathways can we look at using, which is where like the peptides come in and kind of modulate different pathways instead of pushing everything down androgenic pathway, just like more testosterone, more DHTs, more nandrolones. Um, what else can we kind of bring in to kind of complement all that? Which I think is where where like the kind of the popularities come from. And what I think as well is like more how accessible they are as well. Like they're not just injectables. Like there's a lot of like oral peptides that we take. Like BPC can be taken orally. Might not be as effective as taking an injectable, but that kind of entry level into it um, is kind of a lot more accessible for people.
Yeah. What are like the potential benefits of peptides for like weight loss, like Ozempic? And then is there any like anti-aging kind of peptides that are out there right now?
Yeah, so the weight loss ones, yeah. So you've got like your Ozempic, your Mounjaro, and you've got a new one called retatrutide. So Ozempic, semaglutide, Mounjaro's tirzepatide, and then retatrutide is like the third generation one. And I know they get a bad rap for being like, well, people taking them to lose weight. And I think people take them as if they are like the magic bullet to weight loss, which like they are the best thing that has been created for obesity. I do
Yeah.
think they do have a really good benefit there, and the pressure they'll take off the health service for kind of obesity, I think, is going to be really profound. And the way they work is really interesting. So like semaglutide being a GLP-1, so glucagon-like peptide one a mimetic that interacts with like GLP-1 receptor, which is what kind of regulates your satiation and like fullness from meals. So all it's kind of really doing is kind of blocking that hunger signal. It slows down digestion. There's like a lot of side effects that come with it. So like gut paralysis, and people think it's like causes muscle wastage. And I think when you kind of look into like the gut paralysis and the muscle wastage, when you kind of look into it, is it's a risk, but I think it's from kind of like poor nutrition as well, because like the muscle loss that kind of occurs with it is no different from if someone's doing like a really dramatic um, calorie deficit diet, really extreme calorie deficit diet. Like you're not getting the food in, you're not getting
Yeah.
your protein in, you're gonna lose muscle. It's kind of a similar along those lines. If you're getting the nutrients in your micronutrients, your macronutrients, it's just going to kind of blunt that hunger. So if we think it from an athletic point of view, and you're doing a weight cut, and if you're just someone who gets a lot of food noise and just doesn't like being hungry, essentially, like a low dose of semaglutide, if that just kind of like blunts that hunger, stops you thinking about food, like a really low dose can be used kind of like quite like long term. Like, well, the data we've got spans like years of use with people, so like we've got a lot of clinical data there. But that's like in people like a metabolic dysfunction populations or like type 2 diabetes, like obesity. Um, so yeah, if we're looking like from athletes who are already on like calorie restricted diets, exercising regularly, doing what they need to do to stay healthy. Yeah, like I said, low dose of semaglutide isn't gonna have the same effects like that, and just like kind of blunts that hunger. Tirzepatide, it's kind of next generation on, so that kind of works through two different pathways. So it's a GLP-1, but then it's also a GIP, which is a um, works glucagon. So glucagon is when your blood sugar drops, glucagon's released to release glucose from the liver into the blood. So it kind of stimulates that release of glucose to kind of for weight loss. So like it's pulls out glucose from the liver, stimulates weight loss like that. So it kind of works two pathways. So you're blunting the hunger, but also pushing stored glucose out of the body as well. And then retatrutide's the um, third generation one, which works on three different pathways. So they're kind of evolving on every one. Like
Yeah.
when you kind of look at the development of them, like we're going to be seeing like four ones that kind of use four pathways and five pathways. So kind of using different receptors in the body to kind of stimulate as much weight loss as possible. Um, and they are like really well tolerated. It's like tirzepatide, retatrutide. You can like again, you can use these low dose to really kind of have long-term fat loss effects as well. And they're really like, especially semaglutide as well. There's a lot of research coming out about how it can kind of what's the word rewire the dopaminergic and serotonergic pathways. So like when you look at like kind of addictive pathways of like recreational drugs, but also kind of like food and binge eating, rewiring those pathways can get people thinking differently about food. So when they're thinking
Oh,
of
wow.
binge eating um, as like a stress response, for example, that's kind of what's keeping them stuck. When you kind of blunt that hunger and blunt that signal, that kind of like changes their thought process towards food as well. So it's really interesting in how these things also work in kind of that demographic as well. Um, and I think a lot of the issues with these weight loss drugs as well is the like aftercare after them. So what people don't really get, a lot of people who kind of prescribe these things don't get taught is the if you stop these things and you haven't worked on those like bad eating habits and you just resume those bad eating habits after, you will just like obviously relapse to where you were before that. So
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people who are prescribed these compounds is that education side as well of that while you're losing weight, you should be improving your habits to be healthier at the same time as well. So there's that side as well where I think it gets a lot of bad rap as well, being like, well, when you just stop it, you're just going to put weight back on. But yeah, of course you will. If you're just going to go back to eating how you were before, you're
Yeah.
going to put that back on. And yeah, the anti-aging one's a really interesting area. So there's a there's a peptide called epitalon, and that works on lengthening the telomeres on the DNA strands itself. So when you have your DNA, the telomeres are the caps on the end of that DNA to like protect the DNA essentially. And as you age, those telomeres um, wear down a little bit. And one thing that speeds up aging is the rate at which those telomeres get worn down. So like aging isn't something we can stop. Like it's a natural process. It's
For sure.
um, un unwanted aging, like sped up aging. What's bad? Where cells are becoming senescent and aren't doing the job, or just kind of doing sat there doing nothing, or early cell death. That's what's bad about aging. So epitalon can lengthen those telomeres a little bit. So no, not to extend like it reverses aging, but protects those DNA strands against. And the protocols that are kind of in the research are really interesting as well. Is that some of them are like you take 10 milligrams of epitalon a day for 10 days, and then you repeat that protocol 6 to 12 months later, and then that effect lasts like for years onwards. So it's like a really short protocol in short bursts,
Yeah.
which really profound effects. So yeah, for like the anti-aging stuff, yeah, there is a lot of interesting peptides like that, and then peptides which are looking at the kind of anti-inflammatory, antioxidant kind of pathways as well to keep cellular health and the cellular respiratory, like mitochondrial health running optimally. Kind of you can kind of combine them as well to keep everything kind of running smoothly as well.
Are there any like supplements or vitamins or micronutrients that can help with anti-aging that are out there now that people could take like on a daily, or is that kind of not a thing at the moment?
No, yeah, I think for that like um antioxidant side of things, yeah, I think supplementing something like glutathione goes a long way. So glutathione's the body's like master antioxidant. Your body produces it naturally, but you've only got a finite amount of it at any one point. So if you're someone who trains regularly, trains intensive training, you're going to be you burning through like a lot of glutathione to combat the oxidative stress which naturally comes from training. So if we kind of like take a step back of what we mean by strength, like training, producing oxidative stress, is that when you start like when you consume a carbohydrate and how that gets turned into energy, your body breaks down into glucose that gets pushed into the cell. It goes through the Krebs cycle, the citric acid cycle, gets turned into pyruvate. That pyruvate gets moved into the electron transport chain, which is four complexes, um, and the electrons get moved down. Uh, um, Protons get pumped across the mitochondrial membrane. Like really top level explanation, but
Yeah.
it kind of helps you understand why we then use a lot of these things. So those protons get pushed across the membrane in the mitochondria to create like a proton gradient. And then as those protons then kind of come back into the inner membrane, it spins the ATP, so spins the mitochondria, so ATP synthase get pulls it back in. Mitochondria spins, produces ATP. Along that chain, in the electron transport chain, electrons can slip out, which can go off and cause reactive oxygen species and builds up oxidative stress. As that mitochondria spins and ATP is produced, um, things like oxygen and hydrogen can spin off that as well. And then they can cause an oxidative stress buildup as well. So they're kind of natural processes, and the issues come when there's not enough antioxidants to combat that oxidant buildup. So that's kind of what like the redox balance is in your body. So if you're just training, like most people, yeah, but they'll be fine. But then say you come down with an illness, that immune response gets raised again. You're burning through like more glutathione at that point to kind of combat that viral infection, which is building up a ton of oxidative stress. And then
Yeah.
if you're still training, there's that there. So that's where kind of recovery then starts to be really impacted. Or if you're pushing really far into a comp peak and just um that just the demand of training that intensively is going to be putting a lot of stress on your body as well. So it's supplementing glutathione is going to be keeping everything topped up essentially, just to have that antioxidant support there. Just keep things ticking over. It you can kind of push too much with the antioxidants because, like I said, you need some level of it because it starts your body's kind of signaling to be like, oh, I need to recover because there's all this kind of oxidative stress and inflammation there. So your body's kind of obviously like balancing these things out. But if you like say if you went to train and then you injected however much glutathione immediately after you stop training, that's like pushing the reset button on that training session. Like you wouldn't get the adaptations that you would have done normally with it. So like timing is important with like things like glutathione. Like don't take it 3 to 5 hours within a training window pre and post workout. Like I usually advise taking it like start off with like just your rest days, 2 or 3 times a week,
Okay.
enhance recovery on those rest days. And then if you do need to kind of add it in, say you do come down with like a viral infection or something or an illness, that you can take it every day then to combat that because it kind of essentially buffers up your immune system to kind of start fighting off these viruses as well. So in terms of like say yeah, like so to go back to your original question, like just like kind of that basic support, like I think something like glutathione definitely goes a long way.
Sweet. I think a lot of people will appreciate that. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. It's one I always like. It's it just does basically like in terms of that recovery side of things. It just goes a long way.
Are there any peptides that can be used to treat or help like diseases or any type of conditions,
Um,
or has it really been studied yet?
I mean, it's it's a hard one to answer, like, because it kind of goes back to that kind of functional side where they can be used as like if we maintain a like a healthy, if we're looking at kind of like the health side of it by maintaining good mitochondrial efficiency, low levels of inflammation, low levels of oxidative stress, um, managing glucose insulin sensitivity. You're kind of like not pushing towards that kind of metabolic dysfunction. Like a lot of diseases kind of start with that metabolic dysfunction. So like cardiovascular diseases, for example, a lot of them stem from like high cholesterol levels, coupled with high levels of inflammation. So when you've got like your HDL and your LDL, LDL gets a bad rap as like being the bad cholesterol. Where it's not bad cholesterol. Like your body needs LDL. It's when it gets too high and unmanaged, and then coupled with high levels of inflammation and oxidative stress, when that LDL becomes oxidized, that's when it can start causing problems, when it can start building up as plaque in the arteries, and then blood pressure increases. That puts more pressure on kidneys and the heart, and then the issues that kind of come along from that. So if we're using peptides to help manage that inflammation or that oxidative stress, then it's going to prevent those issues from that coming along. There is a lot of, well, I say a lot, there's certain things looking at how, like, I don't, without getting like too into it because it's kind of opened up a whole different conversation, but in terms of like the anti-cancer effects that some of these have, like really early studies being done, like there's promising effects around there with how, if you think like how cancerous cells kind of work, they're kind of a complete opposite to how a healthy cell works, with how they kind of utilize certain um, they how they grow and things like that. Without getting too into it. So there's like in terms of that side, yeah, and then like a lot of other stuff. If we look at say like thyroid health as well, you can look at so like if we're looking at strain on the thyroid. So if we're looking at like hyperactive thyroid and hyperthyroidism, and then if that's kind of turned into hypothyroidism, you can bring like peptides to kind of regulate that as well, help balance your thyroid. So the thyroid can get put under a lot of stress just through like highly when you're kind of pushing a high metabolic demand on your body, your thyroid tries to upregulate to meet that. But if you keep it there for too long, it essentially will burn out eventually, and then you kind of come into like hypothyroidism then potentially, and among other reasons as well. So again, it's kind of like you're using peptides to kind of manage the underlying side of it, really, to hopefully not then progress on to something that's more untoward your health.
Yeah, so they've they have positive health effects. So would you say that they are pretty safe to use with not as not as many long-term risks, or has they not been studied that long enough to know if there's any risks like BPC since they're not regulated yet?
Yeah, so I mean, like we've got like the whole kind of like category of like immune system peptides. So again, well, as you get older, your immune system starts to kind of downregulate, your thymus gland starts to be less productive. So that's what kind of was opening the door for like a lot of diseases and illnesses, like your immune system just not as strong as it used to be. So if you bring in like the immune system peptides to keep things kind of upregulated there, you're going to have the long-term effects of that with a stronger immune system. Long-term peptide use, there's nothing like kind of set to say if you take it for this long, you're going to get this like side effect. Like I think there has to be some um due diligence with it because if you're like say with BPC or TB, if you're constantly pushing this pathway to this to regulate this immune response and this recovery response. Like if you're pushing that for too long, like I said, like your body needs that like inflammatory response to stimulate recovery after like a workout, for example. So if you're completely blunting that and you're not adapting, like you're never gonna get stronger essentially because your body can't go through that adaptive process. So there can be an excessive use of these things that you can kind of go too far with them and
Yeah, that makes
not
sense.
like slow that kind of progress down, or like too little inflammation is like yeah like is just as bad as too much because yeah like I said you're not going to adapt. Um, and there's other things like when you kind of start looking at like more um the like mitochondrial peptides for like increasing performance. Going back to what I was saying about like when you're kind of spinning the mitochondria to produce more ATP, like if you're spinning that too fast for too long, you're going to kind of get that buildup of oxidative stress as well. So those things that kind of need to be cycled in and out and kind of timed for when you need them the most. And like ones like that, you can't just kind of run long term as well because like yeah, you may run into problems. But a lot of the like side effects, so like BPC, and some people who are sensitive to the dopaminergic changes it brings in can get like the shifts in moods, like low mood, like depressive like mood symptoms. So one thing that like a lot of people don't really consider with these things is like it's 100% on them with how they respond. Like you can advise one person to go take this, but it doesn't mean they're gonna respond in a favorable way with it. Like I said, everyone's different, so it's on them to really not just kind of jump into these like blindly, like yeah, start taking them and like just kind of build up your own like mapping of how you respond to it. Like, chances are you're going to respond well to BPC, but there's that small minority that just might not get on with it for whatever reasons, if they are sensitive to it in that way. So if someone's noticing, yeah, that kind of shift in mood or something like sleep's being impacted, um, uh, just not just find that kind of just shift in their own kind of well-being and mental state. It's like, okay, it's probably just not working in that way that
That
you're
you want
wanting
it
it
to.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just stop taking it, and it's just not something you're going to be able to utilize. So yeah, I think a lot of people just kind of need to take ownership of what they're doing. Like when you're taking these things, like same like PEDs, like you're taking like your health into your own hands with it, essentially. I think yeah, a lot of people just kind of take it blindly. I think as well, a lot of these things kind of get taken too too easily as well. Like someone gets a little bit of te elbow tendonitis, it's like, "Oh, I'm just going to put some BPC in it," but it's like, but why have you got tendonitis? Like tendonitis is an overuse injury. It can stem from poor shoulder mobility as well, and
Yeah.
your elbow compensate. So yeah, if you're putting BPC into it, yeah, you're gonna take the edge off the pain with your elbow tendonitis. But if you're not fixing the underlying issue there, as soon as you stop the BPC, you're gonna get elbow tendonitis again. So there's that kind of misunderstanding about what these things actually do as well.
Yeah. I think what most people need to take away is they need to focus on their basic things that they really need to do and get those where they need to be. Their training right, their sleep right, their stress, their nutrition, hydration, and then focus on the things either for performance or for to help their health and stuff like that. It's not like this easy fix all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like it's the environment you bring these into is going to dictate the response you get out of them. So if you're trying to heal a bicep tear, but you just got like a massive amount of systemic inflammation and systemic stress going on, like that BPC is not going to be directed to there. It's going to be directed to, it's going to be trying to combat like systemic inflammation, which is like a small dose of BPC isn't going to get through. There's like a kind of chemical pressure with these things. So when you talk about doses, the standard dose of BPC starts at like say 250 micrograms. That doesn't mean to say that 10 micrograms, 20 micrograms isn't going to do anything. Like you'll inject it, it's going to do something. Your body's going to absorb it and do something with it. In terms of muscle tear, it's just not high enough dose to be tipping the scale to be stimulating a recovery response to heal that bicep. So through studies and anecdotally, it's like, well, okay, 250 micrograms is this. When you're kind of pushing, if you've like someone gets a blood test done and their C-reactive protein is through the roof, all the other inflammatory markers are through the roof, If you're trying to pull that down through BPC use, you maybe looking at saying like take 1 milligram, 2.5 milligrams, 5 milligrams, just to really kind of get through that inflammation, start stimulating like a positive response to pulling all that down.
Yeah. So based on your experience, what do you think is the most exciting development in peptide science at the moment?
I think it's the mitochondrial side. So where I think like when like people put it into like strongman powerlifting context, a lot of people like just look at the strength sports like through a lens of it's just force output, recovery, and injury risk, and injury mitigation. But then they don't really think about the neurological demands and the mitochondrial efficiency that come with it. So kind of both ends of the spectrum, like the neurological demand of like you're trying to coordinate muscle coordination to pull this deadlift, and then the energy that's required at the mitochondrial level to achieve that. People kind of stay in between of just being like, oh, it's just like just muscles and recovery. Um, so I think like yeah, the mitochondrial side of being able to like kind of keep that as efficient as possible. And like when I was talking about like the electron transport chain and pushing electrons down it, if you can push more down it, create that kind of higher pressure like protons in the mitochondrial cell and produce more ATP, like more energy to maximally lift like a deadlift, like maximal strength um expression. But then it's like the neurological demands that come with that, which while they're not peptides, I think this is where kind of nootropics kind of really come into it. I kind of class them nootropics and peptides like when looking at performance, like in the same world, like what nootropics are doing neurologically is essentially what peptides are doing um, within the body itself. So for something to be classed as a nootropic, it has to have antioxidant benefits within brain tissue. So kind of regulating like inflammation between neurons and keeping it kind of firing optimally, which I think is a big disconnect with how much that has an impact on strength training. So if someone's carrying like a lot of cognitive fatigue, a lot of neurological stress, that will limit like physical performance. So, like if someone has like a poor night's sleep, that they sleep only 2 or 3 hours and then try and do a heavy deadlift, like that rate of perceived exertion will be massively increased from poor sleep.
Yeah.
But it can be equal for like say someone's got a really mentally taxing job, they're working 8 hours a day and it's just really mentally taxing, like just pure brain power. They're burning through like a massive amount of neurotransmitters, which are the exact same neurotransmitters that are needed to lift heavy in the gym later that evening. So they've finished work, straight to the gym, they try and lift, like everything just feels disconnected, nothing's clicking. It's like they've forgotten how to deadlift. Like they've got a really good session a week before, they'll still be carrying maybe a little bit of fatigue from that session. They've been working all that time between then, and they're just not nearly recovered. Like they might come into the gym like physically, they might feel like, oh, I'm really good, like muscles feel ready, my joints aren't hurting, I'm stretching, I'm warming up, things feel good. But then when you start pushing that kind of sub-maximal weight, things start kind of falling apart a little bit. You can't kind of like coordinate quite right and things like that. So for me, that's where like the nootropic side comes in. And then, yeah, and then the peptides, depending what they need, like if they're kind of wanting more anti-inflammatory effects on your BPC, your TB, if you want to kind of push more mitochondrial efficiency, like your MOTS-C, methylene blue, kind of like things like that in that world, like SLUPP 332. And then in between that, yeah, things like your immune system peptides, if you kind of wanted to sack them. So this is like one thing that the ebook kind of really dives into. Like there is this whole world of peptides, but there's not really anything out there. Like how do we kind of put all this together? Like how do you design a peptide protocol? Like when do I use this? How do I use this?
Yeah.
What is this for? So yeah, the ebook kind of really tries to address that as a whole. Like when will I take this, and this, or things like that? Yeah, and how do I layer in the new nootropics like alongside that as well?
What kind of nootropics do you like to focus on for performance?
Um, so it's not for the nootropics, it's not strictly performance, it's more the the enhancing learning. So if you think like getting stronger. So like strongman's a really good example for this. So you just signed up for a competition or you're starting to train for a competition and it's got events in that you've not done for a while. So say it's got like a max dumbbell event in there, but you've not touched a dumbbell for ages. So the first few sessions you're coming in is going to be a lot of skill work, just kind of find your groove with that again.
Yeah,
So you'll be able to learn that skill and maintain that movement pattern as quickly as possible. So you can then start focusing on actually building the strength around that. So something like noopept is going to enhance the learning and like help like encode those motor patterns and techniques faster. So what may take you like three, four, maybe five sessions to like really find your groove again with that kind of find your rack position, getting your dip right, getting your drive right, all that stuff. If you bring something like noopept, it might only take you two or three sessions to get all that kind of finding your groove again with it. And then you've got kind of more time then to really start building up to that. And then there's alpha GPC, which is kind of acetylcholine, direct acetylcholine replacement. So acetylcholine is the main neurotransmitter for like muscle contraction, neuromuscular coordination, force output, but it's also one of the main ones for like focus, memory, like learning as well. So again, it's not just something that's going to be used during training, it's something you're going to be using like through the day, like if you're working, doing like mentally demanding tasks.
for sure.
So if you like, so going back to the example, if someone's working like 8 hours a day, really kind of mentally demanding job, if they took a serving of alpha GPC pre-workout just to kind of top up those acetylcholine levels again, you're just going to kind of bring in um, that substrate for that muscle contraction, kind of get things firing, clicking a little bit better, increase attention span, increase focus, increase memory, help retain that skill a little bit more as well. So okay, when you kind of bring it in alongside noopept, you've got acetylcholine, which is going to like be a main drive for that kind of muscle contraction and coordination, and then noopept's going to help retain that skill and that learning and just help kind of like it's got like a lot of benefits for like kind of neural recovery as well. So being able to adapt faster to high CNS loads and then recover faster between those more neural sessions.
Is there a dosage that you recommend for the alpha GPC?
Yeah,
Is it
usually
based on
like
the,
I say that again, sorry.
or is it based on the person?
No, I think you can't really go wrong with like 300 to 600 milligrams of it. Like one thing to watch out for is some people, again, may just not get on with it. A lot of people may get like a real stimulatory effect from it. Like it is for people who can't have caffeine, it's a really good kind of alternative to that to kind of drive what caffeine does. So if you think caffeine kind of drives up that kind of focus
Yeah.
and that more like stimulant effect. Alpha GPC can be a good alternative for that, but some people are really sensitive to it in terms of that stimulant-like effect. It can kind of like build a tolerance to it. I've seen some people build a tolerance to it where, yeah, at first it's like it kind of gives them the jitters. So like, yeah, always like for things like this, always start on the lower end and assess your own tolerance to it and then build up. If it is like a really like kind of really mentally demanding day, like it's one of those valves for GPC. You can take it as and when needed. Like you can take it before you go to work, like take a small dose, then take another small dose pre-workout. Some people find it as really good as like a sleep aid as well. Because acetylcholine, if you look what it does during sleep, when you're in REM sleep, your brain gets flooded with it. That's what kind of gives you like a one of the reasons why you get like really vivid dreams during REM sleep.
Hmm.
Just kind of all that brain activity from acetylcholine. So a lot of people, oh, not a lot of people, but some people may find sleep benefits from it as well. But if you're someone who gets like a stim-like effect from it, then like take it away from bed, obviously. So yeah, it's kind of like 300 to 600 milligrams for most people can go a long way. And then the new peps, yeah, there's like a low dose, like 20 milligrams pre-workout. Again, is enough for most people, like 20 to 40 milligrams through the dose. Just for that kind of learning enhancement and just helping retain those motor patterns from a skill acquisition and lifting.
Is it better to take, like, is there pills for that? Is it a powder? How do you kind of,
Yeah, both alpha GPC and Noopept are both capsules, so yeah, easy to take. It's like yeah, pre-workout, pop a couple of capsules, and you're good to go. Like with alpha GPC, there's so alpha G acetylcholine's like the end of like what choline is essentially. You can take choline oral and injectable, and choline has its place as well. Choline will kind of do more, be like the acetylcholine, but then also kind of drive up dopamine and serotonin as well. So if you're someone who kind of needs that push up in more dopamine and more serotonin, CDP choline specifically can help with that. You can get that in a capsule form as well. Um, so yeah, kind of a few things how you can like layer in certain things like that to so you think like with like dopamine as well, if you are someone who um just needs that kind of more dopamine driven focus with lifting, then yeah, CDB kind of like something like L-tyrosine can help with that. But again, I usually find like dopamine's kind of a weird one to play with because you can easily push dopamine a bit too much, and then people start getting like kind of anxious side effects from it. And it's like I don't really tend to kind of push that route more unless someone like really needs it. I think like the alpha GPC is like kind of tolerated really well by most people.
Okay. If someone were considering peptide therapy for health and wellness, what kind of advice would you give them, kind of besides getting your ebook that's coming out soon?
I think the main one is just finding a really like genuine source for them, because these things are unregulated. It's like can be a case like you don't know really what you're taking. So find somewhere that does a lot of the test all the products, quality test it yourself. So when you get these in like your little vials and they come in there, it should be like when you get the little vial, it should be like a lyophilized like cake at the bottom. So it should be a solid kind of block at the bottom of the vial. It shouldn't be loose powder. And then when you're injecting the backwater into it, um, it should be like a really strong vacuum. So as soon as you put the syringe in with the water, the vacuum should suck the water straight in. You shouldn't have to push the plunger down whatsoever. If you do, it means most likely the vacuum seal has been broken. So it would question the sterility of that product.
Okay.
Um, so I think that's the main thing I'd say is just looking at getting a quality source. Because if you kind of skip that step and you're getting something that's contaminated with something, you're injecting this and the infections that could come with it can be really nasty.
Yeah. Are there any peptides that improve endurance or stamina for athletes?
Yeah, so it's not really a peptide, but cardarine's the first one that comes to mind. So if anyone's kind of looked into cardarine, they've probably found that the carcinogenic reports and studies on it. But again, I think context is everything with that. If someone's got a history of cancer in the family, yeah, maybe don't go near it. But when you kind of look at the research on cardarine, it's been done on rats that are really predisposed to tumor growth. In some studies, the mice or rats were administered with a known carcinogen, and then the cardarine was used to assess how that tumor then grew, and they found that the cardarine sped up the tumor growth. So yeah, like again, if you've got tumor growth already there, then yeah, don't use this stuff. But at a low dose, um, it can enhance kind of athletic performance. So it's going to increase things like your fuel utilization, how you kind of utilize glucose and fatty acids for energy. It can have positive types on fiber alteration. So we know exercise when you're trying to express more type 2 fibers, it can kind of lean more towards those fiber types. So a lot of benefits with them. L-carnitine as well, I think is a really good one. Like it's um, probably like most well tolerated thing. Like the side effects are only really known when you're in like stupidly high doses of it, which no one's really ever going to go to. And that side effect is only going to be diarrhea really because it's how your body kind of like when you're kind of expelling it out, it's just going to cause diarrhea side effects. It's not, I wouldn't even say it's really a side effect, but that's going to really. So what L-carnitine is used for is kind of carrying fatty acids into the mitochondria. So more carnitine that you can push more fatty acids into the mitochondria for more energy. Um, it can proliferate and increase sensitivity of androgen receptors. So even for natural athletes, it's like how your body um, how the androgens kind of attach to the androgen receptor, how strongly they bind to it, is like how strong the effect of that androgen receptor is then the transcription in the DNA in the cell itself, and then how quickly that can then unbind and then get carried across to the next one. So kind of like in enhanced athletes as well, it just means that androgen load they've got at that dose is going to work that little bit better essentially. So if they're taking like however much milligrams a week, so like for example, say someone's taking 250 milligrams of testosterone per week, and it's doing this for them, you bring in L-carnitine, it's going to work that a little bit better. And yeah, with the increase when you're kind of looking at like the endurance side, especially with strongman, being able to like push through like moving events for longer, L-carnitine is going to shine in that aspect, and then cardio is going to help keep you pushing for longer. So when we're kind of looking at things like utilizing kind of that energy switching, so like two fuel of like glucose and fatty acids being like your two main sources of fuel, being able to switch between them quickly and efficiently, depending on like the energetic demands that you're going through. Like in strongman, like yeah, you'll start off in that like kind of glycolytic kind of energy system, but then if you kind of keep pushing, you'll eventually move into that aerobic energy system where like fatty acids being used more for energy. So being able to switch between those efficiently is things like what cardarine and L-carnitine is gonna enhance.
I know at the beginning you mentioned that you kind of dove into the women's health and kind of like peptides and hormones. Kind of go more into that and kind of like what you kind of discovered and kind of what you're doing with that now.
So yeah, so I always kind of use the term like females aren't small males because a lot of things previously have just been, well, males take this, so just lower the dose down to take this. So things like when people think like female friendly steroids, you automatically think like Anavar, and it's not female friendly. It's just better tolerated than other things at a low dose, but it doesn't mean it's like safe for them to use. Like if someone starts off at 5 milligrams of Anavar, yeah, they might get on really well with it, but someone might have viralizing side effects and masculinizing side effects of it still. Like this is just how person dependent these things are. Um, but if you think about with peptides as well, I don't think was one another chapter in my ebook. I don't think really anyone's really mentioned female specific considerations with peptides that openly because when you bring the menstrual cycle into it, like things change dramatically. Like you think like male physiology, like the endocrine system's like really basic. It's like testosterone and estrogen in relation to that. Testosterone in natural males, yeah, it's sensitive to external stresses. So like lack of sleep will lower testosterone, high stress environments will lower testosterone. Um, but so and it fluctuates for the day. But like with females who if you don't have like birth control in the picture, female physiology, like with the menstrual cycle, like estrogen, progesterone, like cycling up and down month to month, and different times in a month will have different physiological effects. So if you think like follicular phase, like te generally like days 1 to 14, estrogen starts rising, usually find inflammation a bit lower. The nervous system is in a more parasympathetic state. Um, you'll be able to like kind of drive performance up that little bit more. So if you think like in the training block, females might be able to push like kind of more high volume blocks better, but kind of build up strength through volume a bit easier. Get to ovulation, testosterone kind of peaks, so like kind of maximal strength will be able to be showcased a little bit more at ovulation with a little bit higher testosterone. And then as you kind of come into the luteal phase and progesterone starts climbing, things like serotonin will start dipping, inflammatory load starts rising as that kind of shift in like estrogen comes down, progesterone comes up. Um, so that's where kind of a lot of females just kind of start to feel that dip in performance within the gym. And then like, when you look at studies, like there's a lot of studies out there which conclude like the menstrual cycle has like no effects on on a training performance. And like yeah, like if you look at like the Olympics, like there's females out there who have won gold medals like while they've been on the period, but you can't just kind of blanket it across like every athlete. Like you ask any girl out there, it affects the training in some way.
Yeah.
Like when you think it's like the uterine line is literally being shredded from the inside, it's like it's uncomfortable. Like girls going to the gym, like not gonna want like if you've got stomach cramps, it's not gonna feel great while you're training. So there's gonna be that side as well. But then yeah, like I said, the serotonin dips, there's gonna be like shifting mood. Mood swings are gonna be a maybe a bit more of a thing. Recovery might be a little bit slower as that inflammation rises. So when you kind of like look at those different phases of the menstrual cycle, you could kind of start looking at peptides like what could we bring in to kind of help these things. So um, like in the follicular phase at the start, you might get more of a response out of nootropics at that point, like better focus. You'll get more effect out of your growth hormone peptides because estrogen and growth hormone are very synergistic with IGF-1. So you'll get might get a better, maybe a potentially better response out of them. Um, Ovulation, again, peptides for like nootropics will kind of come in because higher DHT from the testosterone increases hand-eye coordination. So like for skill learning and adaptation, it's a really good time for that as well as like kind of expressing maximal strength for the higher DHT. So you'll maybe get a little bit better response from nootropics at that point. Um, and then yeah, like as I said with the luteal phase, as inflammation starts to rise, if you're trying to luteal phase and coming into like kind of menstruation as well. If there's females out there who just build up a lot of systemic inflammation or systemic fatigue, um, they might find like something like a BPC just to kind of might just take that edge off a little bit. Or if we're getting kind of get going right off into a whole other conversation, but if you look at um, gut health might start to worsen during menstruation as well. So that's where something like oral BPC might help a little bit. Just to keep like if someone's like bloating quite a lot after meals, with how protective estrogen is of the gut itself in menstruation when estrogen is low, yeah, it might just kind of exacerbate any underlying gut issues or if there's like gut issues there, it might just be a little bit worse there. So yeah, so like I said, different peptides at different phases of the cycle could be looked at. Like it does come down to like a lot of micromanagement. Like if a cycle's like 28 days, it's like yeah, it's not realistic to be kind of cycling in like different things here and there, but it's more like if someone's trying to take these things. So it's like if someone's taking like yeah, the growth hormone peptides and they're kind of timing it in the luteal phase and like, well, I'm not really getting much out of this. It's like, well, yeah, it might just be that hormonal environment you're bringing this into. You're not able to kind of utilize it to its full potential. Um, and yeah, like as you kind of like push into like kind of the perimenopause and menopause world as well, you look at like what's going on there and like estrogen, progesterone starting to decline. So that's going to kind of change female physiology like massively as well. So like low estrogen might start kind of opening up like joint pain, like I said, gut dysfunction. Um, Inflammation starts increasing because you're losing the anti-inflammatory benefits of estrogen. So it's like, yeah, what peptides can be brought in there? Growth hormone peptides as like kind of growth hormone output starts to decline as well, going through perimenopause and menopause. Yeah, kind of like growth hormone support might help a little bit as well. Then yeah, like nootropics again are like going to be maybe really beneficial at this point as well because you'll get that kind of as you kind of move through menopause, there's that drop in brain-derived neurotrophic factor in females. So if you're bringing like nootropics, like kind of that support, that's going to help like improve cognition through that hormonal transition as well. Um, so again, yeah, it's like a whole different world when you kind of start looking at it in females. Like, yeah, it's like when you kind of talk about it and look into it, it's like, yeah, you might be looking like that kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% difference in the when you time these things, but it's like when you compound that over the months, like if you think about the menstrual cycle as well, like um females on the period for 1 week every month, like that's 12 weeks over here. That's like 3 months that someone's in that kind of reduced like physical state of like preparedness for training. If we can like bring something in just to kind of like prop that up a bit and keep them pushing like because like 3 months is like quarter of a year of like
Yeah, that's a long
not being
time.
able to train. Yeah, so it's like, what can we bring in to prop that up so they can kind of get that extra 3 months of productive training back? So yeah, so like that's what really kind of got me into it because like I think it was just a really underrepresented area with strength athletes. Like bodybuilding, like again, like it goes to, like when you look at like female bodybuilding, like these things are being like discussed like really openly, like female hormone stuff in bodybuilding. Because when like female bodybuilders and like bikini athletes and things like that are like really pushing these heavy deficits, like they'll be losing their period just from being in a low deficit. So
Yeah,
there's a real strong focus on um like period like menstrual cycle recovery because like menstrual a healthy menstrual cycle is peak female health. Like regardless if you want kids or not, being able to bear kids with a healthy menstrual cycle is like pinnacle health. So there's always like a real strong focus on that, but you can lose your menstrual cycle just from like pushing high bouts of stress from training potentially as well. So again, it's like how can we support that? How can we keep performance optimal during the period as well? And like what's out there to utilize these things? Like there's a lot of other underlying things as well. Like with my own coaching, I don't immediately go towards peptides. I'm like, well, if you're suffering really bad PMS month to month, it's like, okay, we'll see where blood work is at. Like, is it potential estrogen dominance or something like that? Is there some underlying issue with just hormonal balance itself? And then peptides are always kind of like, or peptides or these kind of supplements always much further down the line of what can we then bring in to improve things further once we've done all the basics. Like you said, everything starts with like nutrition, sleep, stress management. Once the foundation is in place, then you can start kind of like moving up the pyramid, so to speak, of
yeah.
what else can you bring into these things.
If the base is pretty good for someone that, a female that's training and stuff, what kind of supplements do you recommend, kind of during the menstrual cycle? Is there anything specific?
You should just as long as you're hitting your micronutrients, so like yeah, all your B vitamins, good amount of magnesium, zinc, because like all these things like magnesium, zinc, in terms of like overall ovarian health, um, hormone production, managing that kind of stress and that inflammation. So if you look at like what a lot of like not all PMS symptoms, but a common sign is estrogen dominance, which can stem from like poor gut health. So I say a lot like everything starts in the gut. So females are really sensitive to how their body metabolizes estrogen. It starts in the liver. That will then like conjugate up estrogen. It will get passed through into the gut to excrete out. But if there's overactive enzyme, well, there should be a small percentage of that that gets reabsorbed through the gut as like kind of to maintain estrogen balance. But if a high amount of that estrogen is being unconjugated and then reabsorbed, it's like a bad feedback of kind of increasing estrogen. So like you're kind of producing estrogen and reabsorbing it at the same time. If you're estrogen dominant in that luteal phase, um, and progesterone's quite low, that's where PMS symptoms can stem from. So yeah, when looking at things like that, it's always like let's look at the gut first. What can improve, like nutrition, improving that, and then like and like then start bringing in the supplement side to aid that. So if there um, is a high amount of um, estrogen dominance, for example, yeah, start looking at like liver detoxification, supporting that through certain supplements, and then look at if it is being reabsorbed heavily in the gut, then you can supplement like with calcium D-glucarate to balance that out a little bit more, start getting all that kind of balanced out. If the everything kind of looks okay there, um, or if you want to kind of get more in depth with it, I think this is where what's called a Dutch panel comes in really handy, which is a dry urine total comprehensive hormone panel. So the thing what a blood panel is, it's just what's in the blood at that specific time. It's not really what's being used in tissue. A Dutch panel's going to look at the metabolites as well. So it's like what's going on at a tissue level, which is really good for hormones. So it really breaks down the like hormone pathways more closely. So when you get a blood test done for estrogen, it's always only E2 that's on the blood test. You never really see what's going on with E1, E2, well, E1 and E3. Whereas the Dutch panel will look at E1, E2, and E3, look at how they're being broken down into different metabolites. So your 4 hydroxy, 12 hydroxy, and 16 hydroxy. Um, yeah, I think that's right. No, 2 hydroxy, 4 hydroxy, 16 hydroxy. And then what goes on there, how they're being kind of metabolized and then passed through. So if there's a lot of bias towards 4 hydroxy, that's a highly estrogenic and kind of a more inflammatory um, estrogen pathway. So you want to kind of balance that out and push more towards a 2 hydroxy, which is more the healthy and protective side of estrogen. Then look at like what's going on with methylation as well. Methylation plays into like so many different pathways as well. So if you need to increase methylation through that's where generally where your B vitamins come into, push up methylation that way, like better eating, healthy nutrition as well. And they kind of like start balancing it out that way. And then yeah, then if you need that little bit extra, then yeah, things like peptides may start to help
Okay.
from that point onwards.
Are there any specific like nutritional strategies that you like to focus on or that work best, like with combination of peptides to maximize strength and muscle?
I mean, yeah, like I don't think nutrition has to be anything overly complex. It just goes back to if you're got like the kind of fundamentals in place with nutrition, so you're getting like a decent amount of protein, um, your carbohydrate intake is like a good balance of carbs. Then your fat intake is like for me, I tend to push kind of like not the low fats, but kind of keep fats about quite medium level as opposed so I can push carbohydrates higher to kind of fuel performance
Yeah.
through that. And it's like as long as those are in place, like again, it just comes down to as long as you've got the basics in place, these peptides, it's gonna everything's just gonna work that a little bit better when you've got the basics in place. So like for nutrition, it's like the people I work with nutrition, like as long as you're hitting sound nutrition like 80% of the time, like unless they're in a phase where we need to be really restrictive, like fixing gut health issues, there will be a period where there's a lot of elimination diets going on and just trying to figure out what's what with things. It's going to be strict, but if it's just kind of driving just performance, it's like, yeah, hit it for 80% of the time, like we'll have like an off-plan like meal, which keep within the realms of your macros, but if you want to go have a
Yeah.
pizza once every now and then, it's not going to be the end of the world having a pizza or enjoying something. Like I like using like off-plan meals purely from like a dopamine perspective. So it's like yeah, okay, you can use them as a if you're like in a deficit, have that kind of like refeed kind of period with them. But I like to kind of bring them in as like a kind of dopamine. So like I always say, yeah, get something that you're going to really enjoy eating, you're going to look forward to eating. It's got a big dopamine hit because then if you have that at a weekend, you're just going to carry that dopamine. You can ride that dopamine into the following week and
Yeah.
as that kind of that focus and motivation drive to be like, oh, if I get through this week, hit everything, hit my nutrition. It's like some people just need that kind of drive to be like, I can get an
Yeah.
off-plan meal. And like, I think nutritionists who are like, no, I don't believe in cheat meals or off-plan meals. We have to stick to this 100%. It's like the adherence to that is just going to decline. Like some athletes can do it. Don't get me wrong. Like some can stick to it like that, but there are some athletes out there who just need something to look forward to, like every once or twice a week at least, just to keep that adherence level up.
Yeah, the everyday person's not going to be able to stick with something like that too. So having
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
having that cheat meal or that thing in there is going to help them. Like, oh, I can look forward to that meal, and then 2 days later, I'm going to get back on track. Training is going to be fine. You might even hit a couple PRs the next workout. Because you have that extra calories, that extra energy to use
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
for that workout. So, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we end here?
No, I think we've covered a lot. Yeah, I mean, I've just looked at the questions you sent over.
Is there anything that we missed that you wanted to kind of talk about? I know a lot of the peptide stuff we kind of covered throughout the talk. And we didn't really need to go over the question, but is there anything that you see that you want to touch on before we end?
um, no, I think that's everything. Yeah, I think we did cover a good amount. Yeah, and everything we talked about, I touched on it. I covered in the ebook as well. So
Yeah.
Like I said at the start, um, that hopefully if everything goes well this week, that'll be coming out next Wednesday. I'm just kind of getting all the little bits tied up. I'm going to put some Instagram material out tomorrow about it more to kind of say, oh, it's coming out next week. Going to get all that kind of the promo stuff
For
set out
sure.
for it. So yeah, I mean, if anyone's interested in that, my Instagram's at Harry Squatter underscore. So yeah, I'll be pushing it out on that, and then it'll be available on my website, which is harrisonfleetwood.co.uk. But no, yeah, I'm really excited to get that ebook out. I think for what I've achieved and the way I've laid it out, it's aimed at both kind of athletes and coaches really. Like it's kind of low level enough that people can come into it and like get a good understanding, but then for the coaches who kind of want to use it more as a resource or the higher level athletes as a resource, it can be used as that, oh, what can I use for X, Y, and Z to kind of build up this area as well. So I've tried
Yeah.
to kind of, I didn't want to go too in depth with it and start just throwing out a load of technical terms that no one really needs to know to kind of understand how these work. Like I preface it like I did like in this like how certain pathways work. So like how a carbohydrate gets turned into fuel and what oxidative stress is. I think when you a lot of the stuff I put out there is like about education as well. I think like don't just like take these understand like the whys and how they're working. Like even if it's just like a basic level, I think when you kind of appreciate how these things work, you'll have a new appreciation for these things as well and kind of respect them that little bit more. 'Cause like we said, I don't think people should just take these blindly, really. Just like, oh, I've got a bit of tendonitis, I'll just slam some BPC in. I think there's kind of like, even though like, yeah, okay, the side effects are going to be minimal, I still think it's kind of a, I don't want to say reckless, but just you just got a massive misunderstanding of what these things are actually capable of. Um, so again, yeah, it's kind of understanding like on a basic level, like what oxidative stress actually is, like what happens when you're in that kind of metabolic dysfunction state, how, yeah, like I said, how a carbohydrate gets turned into ATP and used as energy, it kind of helps frame it like, hey, like, this is why I'm using this stuff then, because it's helping increase that spin at the mitochondria to increase ATP output, which is then when the energy comes out. And then, yeah, BPC is like I said, is like that kind of like a coordinator of healing and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, I'm going to take this. It's going to create a better environment for healing, and that's going to speed up healing. Then I can bring TB in. It's going to do this, this, and this. Then so yeah, I think when all I want to kind of do is just kind of get people thinking about them more logically, and making more of an executive decision about why they're taking these things. Then yeah, I think the female chaps as well. Like I say, just I think that's just everything female in strength sports is just massively underrepresented. So that's what I'm kind of trying to like open the door to, just a bit more more critical thinking about female use. It's like it's not so much saying, yeah, like with peptide dosing with females, it yeah, okay, it generally is started at half the dose of a male, but not just because the female, it's more the sensitivity to these things. Like they're a lot more sensitive to the neurotransmitter shift, like say dopamine or serotonin, maybe might be more sensitive to the hormonal shifts with these things. So,
Yeah.
like I said, like when you're kind of assessing your tolerance, if females start thinking like, oh, my sleep's starting to be hit a little bit, or my mood's starting to shift a little bit more, like females just generally tend to be more sensitive to things like that.
Yeah, I think that female chapter that section will be really good. I think a lot of people, I know a lot of females listen to this podcast, and I know that people that train and stuff. And I think that once that comes out, I think a lot of them will go over and check out that ebook and check out that section specifically. So I really appreciate your insight and taking the time out of your day to do this with me. You want to tell them your Instagram one more time, just so they can follow you?
Yeah, it's Harry Squatter underscore. Yeah, website's harrisonfleetwood.co.uk, or you can find me through the MST Systems website as well, mstsystems.co.uk. But no, yeah, it's been great. Thanks for inviting me on. It's
Yeah,
been great chatting. I think it's like I said, I think like yeah, talking about this stuff in a kind of strength and performance aspect. It's something like really new. Like I said, it's like try to get it into like kind of strongman and powerlifting all that a little bit more, and how we like kind of utilize these things. Like yeah, going back, it's I don't think androgens are really going to kind of develop any more in terms of what we're doing. Like kind of using them as the best we can, the best we know
yeah,
how to do. So yeah, like it's like yeah, it's about like what else can we kind of bring in to kind of complement all that or kind of push that a little bit further as well. So yeah, like I said, I'm really looking forward to getting this ebook out there. I think it's going to change a lot of people's perspective on these things.
Yeah, I'll be sure to link your website down in the description, and I'll tag your Instagram in there. Um, uh, for all the listeners and viewers, be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to share this out, and we'll hopefully get some people to check out your ebook.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching the Strength Lab podcast.